God, God let it happen. So obviously, I'm not saying he's an evil God. I'm not saying he's a bad God. I'm saying he's good, but he's not always powerful. And some of you, if you're going to be honest with me tonight, that's what you're saying. And you're compartmentalizing that part of God out of your mind. Another thing you can do tonight, you can spiritualize. That means you can acknowledge the truth, but you really don't bring it home. You can say something like this: I will try to harmonize the antinomy of the sovereignty of God and the free will of man. I'll try to figure this thing out. Dr. Ryrie, in one of his books, says this: one can accept the truths of an antinomy and live with them, accepting by faith what cannot be reconciled, or one can try to harmonize the apparent contradictions in an antinomy, which inevitably leads to an overemphasizing of one truth to the neglect or the denial of another. To be sovereign does not mean we should obliterate free will, and free will must not ever dilute sovereignty. And ladies and gentlemen, they're both true. They're both true. And if you try to reconcile them, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You really are. So how do you process this? Well, let me just suggest, here's what you ought to do: internalize. And that is to believe the truth. And let's just share a couple things with you on this. You see, trusting God in the midst of the pain and heartache means that we accept it from him. Now, this is hard, people. We're delving in deep now. Ready? See, trusting God in the midst of our pain and heartache means that we accept it from him. Did you get that? God's allowing this to happen. I can't figure it out. Don't know why. Doesn't make sense to me. Frankly, I think it's dumb. But I'm going to accept it from God. Here's an interesting statement. This one I want you to think about, and if you can write it down, I'd write this statement down. This is huge. Because this is the one, you want me to be honest with you, I struggle with this one. There's a big difference between acceptance and either resignation or submission. Some of you watch this extreme fighting, right? That's going on, the kind of stuff that on TV and they talk about submission. Do you know what it is? It's when one guy overpowers another. See, to submit, for you to submit to somebody, it's because somebody overpowers you. Someone has more authority over you, or you fear the consequences if you don't. And so some of us say, well, I know I got to submit to God. God's more powerful than I am. I might as well submit to him, or I'll resign. I'm tired of fighting. I know I can't win. I'll just resign. People, that's not what God's looking for. Listen, he wants you to accept it. God, I'm just not going to submit to you. I'm just not going to resign to you. But God, I don't know why this happened. I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why you're allowing me to go through this. It makes no sense to me. I can't compute it. It doesn't make any logical sense to me as a human at all. But God, I will acknowledge that you are in total control. And because of that, I will accept it. People, I am not going to sit up here or stand up here and say, hey, that's easy. No problem. All you got to do is say it 3 times and click your heels and you'll be in Kansas. No, people, that's not what happens. It's not just verbally saying it. It's getting it down to the core of your heart and saying, God, I got to accept this, even though I don't understand. You see, trusting God is not a matter of how I feel. It's a matter of my will. See, it's not how I feel. It's making a choice even when I don't feel like it. May I be honest with you? There are times that I don't feel like God is making the right choices. I can tell you there's things in my life that I'm still questioning why God allowed it to happen. It doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense to me. And I don't understand why it has happened to me. You see, trusting him doesn't matter how I feel. It's even though I feel those things, I say, God, I am going to choose to trust you anyway. So the act of the will must be based on belief And that belief must be based on truth. That's why we go back to this book, and that's why we read scriptures from this book, and that's why we say that this book has the truth. And that's why we cling to those truths, even though it doesn't make sense. Why? Because here it is again, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing happens that cannot be used for God's glory and my good. Nothing happens that's not for God's glory and for our good. You saw that video right in the beginning. We shared about the young man whose testimony about his brother who got in an accident and found the bump. Now let's go ahead and see the rest of that testimony and find out a little more information about that story.
I just needed someone to blame for everything that happened. It was really no one's fault, my brother being in the accident, enduring all those pain, enduring all those injuries, just to find out about the tumor. I couldn't blame my brother. I couldn't blame the other drivers, really. God was just a target of opportunity. Now that I look back on it all, it's all about perspective. When things seem to go my way, it's easier to believe that God is love. But it's not easy when the whole world is falling apart. What I've learned through these things is that when I put my whole focus on what is happening around me, it's harder to believe that the God I know. He has always been there for me, but it's hard to believe when all I can see is pain. The same thing can go in the other direction. When I focus on the Savior, it doesn't take the pain away. It just makes it easier to believe the truth. An old hymn I used to sing was, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full into his wonderful face. The things of the earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace."
As I was finishing up this afternoon, this message to share with you, I hit my Facebook. And I got an update of a young lady in her early 20s whose sister is a student here at the Bible Institute. We've been praying for this young lady. She comes from a godly home, godly mom and dad, beautiful young lady with all kinds of talent, who just a few years ago was diagnosed with cancer. Would you think she loves God, that she prays that God would heal her, right? Just found out recently she has a white mass in her lung. Could be more cancer, and the doctor said that the cancer now is just about the point of no return. The young lady decided no more tests. She's done with the fighting. How do you accept that? Is God in control? Yes. Can God use that for his glory? Absolutely. Can it be for this young lady's good? Yeah. You say, how? Don't know. But that's reality. In the Old Testament, as we end tonight, there is a story of a man named Job. Matter of fact, I love asking this question, because we know about Job. Say, who initiated Job's problems and all that went on with Job's life? And people say, well, it was Satan. But if you read chapter 1 of Job, Satan didn't initiate all the trials of Job. God did. That's right, God did. You see, God starts out by asking Satan, he said, hey, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan said, well, God, yeah, well, Job's one of the richest men in the world. He's got family. He's got everything he wants. Of course he's going to love you. Anybody will love you if you give him all that you got. Gave him. And so God said, okay, you can do whatever you want to, but don't take his life. And Satan took advantage of it. If you remember the story, he took his children's life, took all of his wealth away, gave him boils and made him sick. And then he gave him 3 friends who said, obviously, Job, because of all that you're going through, obviously you're in sin. Because this is not how God blesses people to do right. God would never let you go through this. See, I believe that the book of Job was not written to Satan, but for us, to keep us focused and to trust the holy, sovereign God who does not owe us an explanation. He will never answer all of our whys, but in the midst of our whys, he says, who? He is there. He is in control, even when we don't understand. Is that okay? You see, the book of Job, it does not conclude with a conversation between God and Satan, but it concludes with God claiming victory, nor does it even say that God claims victory over Satan. That's not the issue of the book. See, rather, it concludes with a conversation of God with Job, in which Job acknowledges that through his trials, he's come to a new and deeper relationship with God. God will never answer Job's why. Instead, when he asked the whys, God said, who? I'm God. Are you okay with that? Can you trust me? And young people tonight, I'm going to ask you that same question. As I said before, I don't have a clue what's going on in your life. I have no clue. But I cannot help but to believe that some of you are here tonight and you are dying inside. Some of you have gone through the closest thing to hell on this side of eternity, and some of the things that you've gone through is just absolutely mind-boggling. And inside you're bitter and you're angry and you're frustrated. And I'm asking you tonight to do something that's quite remarkable, and actually it's not me, but I'm trying to be true to the Word of God, and it's this. Will you believe that God is sovereign? That He's in control of everything? Will you believe that nothing happens yet that can be used for God's glory and our good? Would you tonight grapple with this? Would you just peel off all the plastic smiles and all the little plastic that you have protected yourself with, and would you, for now, for once in your life, come to grips and say, God, I don't understand it. It's actually done to me. You say, can I tell God that? Look, people, God's not afraid of your emotions. He's not afraid of your questions if you're honest with Him. He knows them anyways. You talk to them honestly, and God will say this, look, trust me. And would you come to the point where you can say, okay, God, I'm going to accept this from you? Would you do that?
Don't let the sovereignty of God be used as a cop-out in your life, but let God use it to bring glory to His name and for your good. In fact, right now, find a leader, find some friend, and sit down with them and say, I want to use this bad experience for His glory and for my good. Or you can go online at wherewasgod.world.org, and you can share with people literally around the world and connect with them in this incredible subject of the sovereignty of God.